The storm was fierce, with heavy rain flooding the streets under the dim streetlights. Strong winds shook buildings and turned umbrellas inside out as people struggled to stay dry. Inside his worn-out taxi, Alex Carter exhaled a heavy sigh. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the near-empty road. Another slow night. Another night without enough money. His gas tank was nearly empty. His rent was overdue. His stomach grumbled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since morning. He had spent the entire evening driving aimlessly, hoping for a good fare, something that would make all the hours worth it. But luck wasn't on his side. He debated calling it a night. Then, through the rain-smeared windshield, he saw her. A woman. She was hunched over, her hands gripping her belly. Even through her oversized coat, her pregnancy was obvious. She staggered forward, her face pale, twisted in pain. Alex's grip tightened on the wheel. She was struggling, desperate, alone. For a moment he just watched. This was none of his business. He knew how this went. People flagged down taxis, begged for rides, and promised they would pay later. But later never came. He had seen it before. He had been tricked before. And he couldn't afford to be fooled again. Then she collapsed. Alex cursed under his breath. His hesitation vanished. Without thinking, he turned on his hazard lights and pulled up beside her. The window slid down, rain blowing in. "Miss, are you okay?" The woman, Emily, looked up. Her soaked hair clung to her face. Her lips trembled, either from the cold or from pain. I need to get to the hospital," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. She clutched the taxi door handle, her breathing ragged. "Please, I don't have any money, but She sucked in a sharp breath, her body tensing with another contraction. Alex's stomach twisted. He hesitated again. No money. He was already struggling. Every dollar mattered. If he let her in, he would waste gas he couldn't afford to replace. And what if she couldn't pay him back? What if she was scamming him? His hands clenched into fists. He needed this night to count. Then suddenly a memory. His mother. Years ago. She had been sick, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. She had begged for a taxi, but no one stopped. No one cared. She almost died that night. Alex swallowed hard. He looked at Emily again. This wasn't a scam. This was real. He reached over and unlocked the doors. "Get in," he said. Emily didn't hesitate. She yanked the door open, collapsing into the back seat, her body shaking. Alex threw the taxi into drive, tires splashing through puddles as he sped off into the storm. The storm raged on, pounding against the taxi like a relentless drumbeat. The wipers struggled to keep up, smearing the rain across the windshield instead of clearing it. In the back seat, Emily cried out, her hands gripping the door handle. Her face was pale, beads of sweat rolling down her forehead. "It hurts," she gasped, her body curling inward. Alex's grip tightened on the wheel. "Just breathe. We'll be there soon." But even as he said it, his gut twisted. Up ahead, traffic was at a complete standstill. A sea of red taillights stretched into the distance. Headlights flashed in the mist. Sirens wailed somewhere nearby. Alex clenched his jaw. No, no, no. He tapped the steering wheel, scanning the lanes. The storm had caused accidents all over the city, and now they were stuck. Emily moaned in pain. Her breathing was fast, uneven. "It's coming too fast. I don't know if I can hold on." Panic gnawed at Alex's gut. They didn't have time for this. He glanced at the GPS. A bridge. It wasn't the fastest route, but if it was clear, they could bypass the gridlock. "Hold on." He threw the car into a sharp right turn. The taxi lurched forward, tires splashing through flooded streets. For a moment, hope flickered in his chest. The road was clear. The bridge was just up ahead. Then his headlights caught something up ahead. A barrier, closed for repairs. Alex's stomach dropped. He slammed his palm against the steering wheel. "You've got to be kidding me." Emily let out a choked sob in the back seat. She was shaking, her fingers digging into the seat. I can't do this alone," she whispered, her voice breaking. Something inside Alex cracked. He turned around, locking eyes with her. Her pain, her fear, her desperation. "You're not alone," he said, his voice steady. "I promise. We're getting to that hospital. Just keep breathing." Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks, but she nodded. Alex gritted his teeth and threw the car into reverse. He had one last option. He sped back onto the highway, weaving between lanes, searching for a gap in the traffic. Then bright lights flooded his windshield. A truck, swerving, coming straight at them. "Watch out!" Emily screamed. Alex yanked the wheel hard. The taxi skidded across the wet pavement. Tires screeched. The car spun. For a split second, everything slowed. The truck's horn blared, so loud it rattled his bones. The vehicle missed them by inches. Alex jerked the wheel, fighting to keep the car under control. The taxi lurched sideways, barely avoiding a street pole. Then silence. His pulse thundered in his ears. Emily's breathing was ragged. Her face was pale with fear. Are we okay?" Alex exhaled shakily. "Yeah." He swallowed hard. "We're okay." But they weren't safe yet. Up ahead, through the rain and fog, he spotted it, the hospital. The glowing red emergency sign cut through the darkness like a beacon. Almost there. Emily moaned in pain again. She was barely holding on. Alex ran another red light. For once, luck was on his side. No cops. No traffic. He pulled into the hospital driveway, tires screeching against the pavement. Alex jumped out, yanking open the back door. "Help! She's in labor." Doctors and nurses rushed toward them. Emily looked up at him, her lips trembling. "You saved me," she whispered. Alex swallowed the lump in his throat. "You're gonna be okay." As the doctors wheeled her inside, Alex leaned against the taxi, his rain-soaked clothes clinging to his skin. He was exhausted, shaken, but relieved. Little did he know, the most shocking part of the night was still to come. The hospital doors burst open, and Alex rushed inside, his arms aching from carrying Emily. Rain dripped from his clothes, forming puddles on the polished floor. "Help! She's in labor," he shouted. A group of doctors and nurses rushed forward, wheeling Emily away on a stretcher. One of them turned to Alex, her face calm but urgent. "Are you family?" Alex hesitated. "No, but I brought her here," he said. The nurse gave a small nod. "We'll take it from here." And then Emily was gone. Alex stood in the middle of the bright, sterile hospital lobby, his chest rising and falling in shaky breaths. His whole body buzzed with adrenaline. He had done his part. He could leave now, get back to work, try to make up for the fares he lost tonight. But his feet wouldn't move. Instead, he sat down in the waiting area, running a hand through his damp hair. Something about Emily, about this whole night, made it impossible to walk away. Minutes ticked by, then an hour. Finally, a doctor approached. His face was serious. "She's in distress," he said. "The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need to operate. Now." Alex's stomach twisted. "Will she be okay?" he asked. The doctor's lips pressed into a thin line. "We're doing everything we can." And with that, he disappeared into the operating room. Alex sank into the chair. His fingers tapped restlessly against his knee. He hated this helpless feeling. Then his phone buzzed. He barely glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Normally, he wouldn't answer. But tonight, something told him to pick up. "Hello," he said, his voice hoarse. "Is this Alexander Carter?" A deep voice asked. Alex frowned. "Yeah. Who's this?" "My name is Richard Grayson. I'm a lawyer. I've been trying to reach you." Alex's shoulders tensed. "A lawyer? What could this be about?" "You have the wrong guy," he said. "I don't need a lawyer." There was a pause. "No, Mr. Carter," the man continued. "You don't need a lawyer. But you do need to hear what I have to say. This is about Robert Carter's will." Alex froze. "Robert who?" he asked. "Robert Carter," Richard repeated. "I believe you don't know him personally, but years ago you saved his son." Alex's pulse thundered in his ears. "What?" His fingers tightened around the phone. The lawyer took a slow breath. There was a car accident. Late at night. You pulled a man out of a burning vehicle before the paramedics arrived. Alex's mind reeled. He remembered that night. The wreckage. The smell of burning fuel. The unconscious man, trapped inside. Alex had smashed the window and dragged him out, just seconds before the car exploded. The man he saved. Alex's voice dropped. Who was he? The next words hit him like a freight train. His name was David Carter. Emily Carter's late husband. Alex's breath caught in his throat. No, that couldn't be right. But it was. Emily's husband, the man she lost, was the same man Alex had pulled from that burning car years ago. The lawyer continued, his voice steady. Mr. Carter, before he passed away, Robert spent years trying to find you. To thank you. When he couldn't, he left instructions in his will. He wanted to make sure that you were taken care of. Alex swallowed, his mouth dry. What do you mean, taken care of? Another pause. Then the final blow. You're his sole beneficiary. He left you everything. Alex shot up from his chair. The waiting room spun. Everything? What? What does that mean? It means, the lawyer said, that as of today, you are the legal owner of his estate, his businesses, and his financial assets. Alex staggered back. No, this had to be a mistake. He was just a taxi driver. People like him didn't inherit fortunes from men they had never met. How much? Alex whispered. Another pause. Then the number that changed everything. Over $10 million. Alex's legs nearly gave out. His entire world shifted. He had started this night struggling to put gas in his car. Now he was a millionaire. And all because of a single moment years ago. A single act of kindness. His mind spun as he tried to process it. Before he could say anything else, a nurse appeared. Mr. Carter? She said. Alex's heart pounded. Yeah. The surgery went well, she said, smiling. Both mother and baby are stable. Relief flooded through him. He nodded, trying to catch his breath. But even as he followed her down the hall, his mind was somewhere else. Was this fate? Karma? A second chance at life? One thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. Alex stepped away from Emily's hospital room, his hands trembling. His body felt heavy, as if the weight of the world had suddenly landed on his shoulders. $10 million. Businesses. Properties. A whole life he never asked for. It didn't feel real. His fingers curled into fists as he tried to steady his breathing. He wasn't supposed to be here, was he? A struggling taxi driver, suddenly at the center of some unbelievable twist of fate. Emily's husband, the man he had saved years ago. His mind replayed the memory, the fire, the shattered glass, the way he had pulled a lifeless body from the wreckage just in time. He had no idea who that man was back then. Now he did, and fate had brought him to Emily tonight. Alex leaned against the cold hospital wall, his heart pounding. What was he supposed to do with this? Before he could think any further, a soft voice broke through his thoughts. Alex! He turned. Emily was awake, her eyes groggy but searching. The room was dim, and beside her, the tiny newborn lay sleeping peacefully. But Emily wasn't looking at the baby. She was looking at him. Alex swallowed. You're awake, he said, forcing his voice to stay even. She studied him, her brows furrowing. You look, her voice trailed off. Something's wrong. Alex hesitated. He wanted to lie, say everything was fine, but he owed her the truth. He stepped forward, rubbing a hand over his face before speaking. Emily, there's something I need to tell you. She sat up slightly, wincing at the movement. Alex exhaled sharply. I knew your husband. Emily blinked. Confusion flickered across her face. What? He licked his lips, his throat suddenly dry. How was he supposed to say this? Years ago, I saved him. The words hung in the air. Emily stared at him, her body frozen in place. You, what? Alex forced himself to hold her gaze. There was a car accident. Late one night. I was driving home and saw the wreck. The car was on fire. I pulled a man out before it exploded. Emily's breathing hitched. Alex swallowed. That man, Was David? Silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks as her lips trembled. "You saved him," she whispered. Alex nodded, his chest tightening. "I had no idea who he was back then. Not until tonight." Emily let out a shaky breath. She was crying now. Her fingers clutched the hospital blanket as she tried to process it. All this time. "It was you?" Alex's throat ached. He didn't know what to say. She let out a broken laugh, covering her mouth. David used to talk about that night. He never forgot. He always wondered who saved him. Her eyes locked onto Alex's, filled with so many emotions. Grief, disbelief, gratitude. Alex finally spoke. "Robert Carter knew. He never forgot either. He spent years trying to find me." Emily's expression shifted. "Wait, my father-in-law?" Alex nodded slowly. Her lips parted. "Why? Why now?" Alex inhaled deeply, choosing his words carefully. "Because he left everything to me, Emily." Emily froze. For a moment, she looked like she hadn't heard him. Then, slowly, her body stiffened. "What do you mean, everything?" Alex forced himself to say it out loud. "The estate, the businesses, the money, everything David's father owned. It's mine now." Emily stared at him, eyes wide. More silence. Then, she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. Alex's jaw clenched. "I know." She swallowed hard. "Why? Why would he leave it to you?" Alex's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Because I saved his son. And when David passed away, I guess Robert saw it as a way to repay the debt he thought he owed." Emily looked down, blinking through her tears. Her fingers clutched the blanket tighter. After a long pause, she spoke again. "I don't know what to say." Alex let out a breath. "Neither do I." Their eyes met again. For the first time since he met her, Emily wasn't just looking at him. She was seeing him. As if she was realizing, just as he was, that this wasn't just some random act of fate. They were meant to cross paths. And neither of them would ever be the same again. Months had passed. But Alex still woke up some mornings expecting it all to be a dream. He was no longer a struggling taxi driver barely scraping by. The weight of unpaid bills and sleepless nights spent worrying had lifted. Now, he had everything he never imagined possible. Businesses, properties, more money than he could ever spend. But as he looked around the beautiful home he now lived in, as he heard the quiet hum of baby Hope's laughter from the backyard, he realized something even more important. Wealth wasn't what changed his life. Family did. Emily had found stability in the months since that night. At first, she resisted his help, insisting she could figure things out on her own. But Alex had made a promise to her that night in the taxi. She wasn't alone. And he meant it. So he was there for her. Through the sleepless nights. Through the grief that still surfaced when she talked about David. Through the moments she doubted her strength, even though she was one of the strongest people he had ever met. Hope had grown under both their care. Alex hadn't planned to be anything more than a friend. But somehow, the little girl had made a place for herself in his heart. She giggled when he made funny faces, clutched onto his finger like she never wanted to let go. And every time he looked at her, he felt something he hadn't in years: purpose. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Alex and Emily sat on the porch. Hope played in the grass, her tiny hands reaching for a butterfly that danced in the air. Emily let out a quiet sigh, staring at the horizon. "You know," she murmured, "I used to think life was just about surviving." Alex turned his head, watching her carefully. "What do you mean?" She played with the hem of her sweater, her voice softer now. "For so long, it felt like no matter how hard I tried, life kept taking things from me. My parents, David, my sense of security." Her eyes met his, uncertainty flickering beneath the surface. "But then," she continued, "I met you." Alex swallowed. She gave a small, almost wistful smile. "You proved me wrong." For a moment, There was nothing but the distant hum of crickets and the soft breeze swaying the trees. Alex reached over, gently taking her hand in his. "Life isn't about surviving," he said, squeezing her fingers. "It's about giving. What you put into the world, it always comes back." Emily held his gaze, and in that moment, something shifted. Hope let out a delighted squeal, stumbling toward them with tiny, wobbly steps. Alex chuckled, catching her just before she could fall. Her little hands gripped his shirt tightly, as if she already knew he was someone she could trust. Emily watched them, her smile growing. Alex looked back at her, realizing something profound. This wasn't the end of his journey. It was only the beginning. Maybe life had even bigger plans for him. Maybe fate wasn't done yet. And for the first time in a long time, he was ready to see where it led.